Good morning, Tri-Cities. It's Friday at 10 o'clock and it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from TRIDEC, and we have a very special guest today. It's my honor to introduce Senator Maria Cantwell. Good morning, Senator Cantwell.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing great. It's great to see you. We really appreciate your time and joining us today.
Yeah. What's the temperature in the Tri-Cities today?
I'm new to the Tri-Cities, and here this last 2 weeks, it feels like it's always around 100. So I'm just going to go with that. Although, yeah, it's probably around 80, but by about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's right around 100. But I got to say, coming from other places that have more Seattle-like weather, we really appreciate the sun, and that's the great thing about Tri-Cities. We have so many sunny days, even when it's hot. We have ways to stay cool. So it's great to be here. And are you in Edmonds this morning, you said?
Yeah, Edmonds, Washington, where it's probably a little more in the 70s, but it's going to be a beautiful day.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Senator, on Coffee with Karl, we have a tradition of talking about coffee cups or coffee mugs that we have. And so I'll kick us off. I have actually a Starbucks mug from Washington. They have the state series, and this is our Washington mug. And I thought it was interesting because, being on this side of the mountains, there's very few of the icons that are on the mug that talk about the diversity of our state. And I just thought it was a good example, of the challenges, but the great job that you and your team do in representing our whole state, because obviously we have many different parts of the state, many different interests and industries and everything else, but you guys do such a great job for all of us. I thought that was kind of a fitting mug for this morning. And do you have a mug you want to share with us?
Well, first, Karl, I could probably talk the whole hour about coffee and coffee mugs. I mean, that's how many.
We could do that too. That's a good idea.
That's how many stories I have about coffee and coffee mugs. But your story reminds me, the mayor of Vancouver, Washington, got mad because there wasn't a Vancouver, Washington mug. So he literally called the CEO at Starbucks and said, I'm not having it. I'm not having this thing where you have a Vancouver, British Columbia mug, but you don't have a Vancouver, Washington mug. So they created one for Vancouver, Washington, which was really, really great of him to, to complain. So now it's going to look like we're having a Starbucks moment this morning, because I too have a Starbucks mug. Well, first I should just say that, I have mugs from all over the state, and it's kind of like my way of constantly reminding myself about various issues. And so I have some from, I have a PNNL mug. I have a mug from, research centers. I have a lot of mugs in DC that also represent our state. So lots of people give you mugs, and but it's a really great way to remember people and remember the event and things that happened. But this morning I have a mug that is a Maui mug. And so,
cool.
And, but this mug, it's Friday and I'm in a really great mood, and I'm looking forward to the weekend before I go back to DC. But this mug I got, there's a famous basketball tournament in Maui called the Maui Classic.
Oh yeah.
And it's a very hard thing to get to because it's a very small gym, and they only invite teams, periodically. You can't appear there every year. So Gonzaga played in the tournament in 2018, and I was able to go, and they faced Duke in the final game and won the Maui Classic that year. So it was a really fantastic moment for the Gonzaga basketball program and for the fans that were there. And it was just, it's a really intimate setting, kind of like watching it in a high school gym. And the fact that they were able to beat Duke, and it's kind of like that moment where people were like, wow, Gonzaga is really for real, and they're really going to do great things. Obviously, we know a lot about them post this. I mean, a lot of us have read a lot about them and saw them play since then. But anyway, so anytime I'm really in a celebratory mood, I get out the Maui mug and just remember that day and what a great moment it is. It's kind of like a reflection on a lot of hard work just was done, and now you get to celebrate. And we just had a really busy week going around our state. And, we've been very busy in DC, but this was the first time we were able to, since the pandemic, get out and go around the state. So we've had a very, very busy week here. So we're doing a little celebrating this morning and just being thankful to be with you.
That's such a fitting mug. And just because you went to the Gonzaga basketball, I have to say, like, we watched that game from home, and it was an incredible game. And then just out of like, we're so proud. I have a nephew that just graduated from Clackamas High School that's actually playing for the Gonzaga men's basketball team. Yeah, his name is Ben Gregg. Yeah, and you talk about hard work, the hard work that you guys have done. That kid, his dad's basketball coach, and my sister, his mom, have supported him for so many years. He's really, really worked hard.
Wait, your nephew?
Yeah.
Oh my
So
God.
his name's Ben Gregg. I'm just giving you.
No, I know. I saw his parents in Indianapolis at the game.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And you're from Indianapolis. Yeah, they were so excited to go back.
We went back there to cheer them on, and
yeah.
I saw them walking around. I saw them at the hotel, various places. So, oh my God, yeah, he's going to be a big star there. That's great. I didn't even know that connection.
Yeah, no, it's, we want to be like respectful and stuff, but we are really proud and just so excited for him and his family. They've all worked really hard. And a cool story, in COVID, the Gonzaga said, hey, we could use you this year. It'd be great to get you in the rotation. So he did like super online classes and graduated early and joined him in December, even though that was technically his senior year. So it was really exciting. He got some playing time a few times, and he's up there doing summer ball now. So
not only did he have playing time in Indianapolis, he got off the bench and shot a 3, and his teammates went insane. They were so excited for him. They're like, dude, you were just in high school and now you're shooting a 3. I'm pretty sure it was a 3 he made. He an incredible shot. Made an incredible shot now. And people are like, wait, this guy just came from high school and got off the bench, and we're in the NCAA tournament and he's scoring a big one. So they were loving it. They were loving it. His teammates were eating it up.
That's an awesome connection. I appreciate you sharing that. But we're just really proud of him and excited for what's going to happen there. And of course, everybody in Washington and surrounding states are all Gonzaga fans. So we're all excited to see how they're going to do this year.
That's great. Yeah. That's great.
Something I thought we'd start off with, Senator, is how'd you get into becoming our U.S. Senator? Maybe can we start with that, and just what's your background? I know you're from Indianapolis originally, but how did you get into becoming an elected official and representing Washington?
Well, I've had a career in both the public and private sector, and I like both. I really do. I think I'm probably a little more oriented towards the public sector, but I've helped start a couple of businesses, and I think when I was working in software, I kind of looked around and saw what was happening, with an information age, the very early phases of that. And I am more of a marketer than than the software, sector employee. I mean, I guess we try to communicate a lot today, particularly to women, that there's lots of roles in these companies. They're not all the scientific role, but, I had a marketing role. But I just kind of looked around and thought, I feel like the world is going to change dramatically. There's going to be some people who are going to be very well prepared for it, particularly if they've had access to a good education. Yeah. And then there's going to be some people who are the divide is going to get bigger. And I kind of thought about that this is in the late 1999, and I was like, I really felt like I really wanted to do something to try to help that, to really try to bridge more of the gap so that people weren't left behind. Now we look at this and it's like so plain, it's right in our face, right? We can really see the gap in a very big way. In 1999, I thought it would be problematic, but I mean, so in a lot of ways we have a lot more work to do. But that's what motivated me to run for the U.S. Senate and get out of the private sector and come back into politics. I had some time before in politics. My father had been on the city council in the Midwest, and so I had kind of seen what that was about. And I like the idea of helping people. I thought, if you can understand how this process works, making change, and you can advocate for the kinds of changes that you'd like to see, I thought that was, a good use of a skill set that I had. So to me, it was very important, and it's still very important to look at this dynamic. I should just say, very proud that the Tri-Cities has the STEM high school, because that's a perfect example of, trying to meet this gap and change and give people access. It's really great.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that's what so many people forget. We all get caught up in the rhetoric and the news cycle, wherever you get your news from, that, public service, it's such a service is a huge part of that. And I mean, just even hearing your story, I just want to give a shout out to you. Like that's so critical, because we forget about it. Like it's not, getting in the political game and all these other things that you hear about. It's really about serving your constituents and serving community. You and your team do such a great job of that for all of us. And
thank you.
Especially your shout out, at the Delta High School, the STEM High School here in Tri-Cities, because that's really the goal. We have, based on different places that I've lived, we actually have more diversity here in the Tri-Cities, and it's great that we have a chance to engage with those families, get them connected with education that can, it's kind of the American dream, right? Like we all want something better for the next generation, and give them that chance at the next job. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the high school, which I've toured, really one of the things we've discovered, and we're still working on this now. We just passed this big research and development bill that we came to the Tri-Cities to talk about. Yeah. But part of that is trying to increase access for women in the science and program, science, technology, engineering, and math. And Delta High School really showed me, when on a tour, I mean, probably 10 years ago now, that the girls were so excited they got to work in groups. They wanted to work in a collaborative fashion. If you made science about working together and trying to solve a problem, they were all in. They were like, let's go. And so now we've been doing a lot of thinking, like, what do we do to encourage this kind of education system to make it more collaborative so that more young women are looking at this as an opportunity?
Definitely. That's so critical for what we need. I mean, between the demographics of our nation changing and the baby boomers starting to come out of the market, and then the next wave of jobs that need that extra level that of training or education that generally are STEM educated. We've just lost so many jobs that are generally lower skilled. We need that next wage, and some of those local efforts we're really proud of here in the Tri-Cities. It's great that you've supported us over the years, and you had a chance to tour them as well. How about we got a new administration in, we have new leadership back in Washington, DC. Can you give us kind of the cliff notes or the elevator pitch, I guess, on how it's going, or some highlights of what you're working on back in DC?
Oh, what a unique time in our history, coming out of a COVID crisis. And I would say that the president and his administration are very focused on trying to recover from that and make the right investments to the future at a time when this change in our economy, this information age, is still unfolding, and what it means for a workforce and the types of training and skilling of a workforce that we need. And so I think right now he's really, and his team, is just really calibrating on what does it take to meet the competitiveness challenges of the future information age economy, and what does it take from an investment perspective. So he's really focused on everything from our roads and bridges to our power grid to cybersecurity to education, and thinking about how America maintains its own competitiveness in a very dynamic economy that is changing, but yes, had a really big pause to it because of COVID, which made it very challenging for a lot of businesses just to hang on for the last year and a half. And so anyway, everything's kind of geared towards that, towards coming out of that and being competitive for the future. As he said, build back better, try to figure out how to do it and make it better than where we were before.
Exactly. I know we've all heard about an infrastructure bill or an infrastructure package, and then obviously read about it that there's been different proposals put forth and a lot of negotiations. it sounds like, do you have any updates or predictions on an infrastructure bill that might be coming out?
Well, I think we'll get something passed, and I think it'll be a significant investment. Exactly how, I wouldn't want to predict, right?
Yeah.
It's like predicting the basketball game. You think you're going to win, but I can't tell you exactly who's going to score the final basket,
Right.
because this is if you read the papers every day, it's a back and forth of negotiation. But I do think there's enough votes in the Congress and the United States Senate for infrastructure investment. And I think that there's a lot to that infrastructure investment. I think, for us in the state, we are the state poised, for more trade expansion in the Tri-Cities. I can't tell you how much, product comes through the Tri-Cities. We've been over to talk to them. I think we were over there several years ago. We were just talking about hay exports, like unbelievable amount of hay exports. But we have to get our infrastructure more prepared. We've seen huge increases in volumes. Again, yes, slowed down by COVID, but nonetheless, over the last 10 years, steady growth in freight traffic through our state. And so one of the big things we're trying to do is increase both our rail capacity to get through our cities better, which means improving at-grade crossings. And there's a couple of big projects in the Tri-Cities that were both in Benton County and in Franklin County and Pasco that we're trying to improve, so that these products that come from the Midwest come through our state, get over to the destinations in a timely fashion, and we can compete. Because the longer it takes, freight can't wait, and somebody buys something from somebody else because they're not going to sit around and wait for our clogged arteries of shipping. Anyway, so lots to do on that, and then lots to do on roads and infrastructure and moving product and moving people. So I think that we'll see an investment that gets done. And of course, there's other subjects that will be discussed, things like broadband and other investments. I think our electricity grid should be included in that. The Tri-City is really big on making sure, Tri-City is really leading on this huge discussion about how we transform our energy economy and how we invest in a grid that's more smart and sophisticated, so it can use power from a variety of sources and use intermittent power to supplant baseload power. And it's really the Pacific Northwest Lab is leading the way on that. And we want to further this. So the infrastructure bill we're proposing, our colleagues support a huge investment in the transmission, upgrading the transmission grid, making the system that we have today more sophisticated and smarter so it can move power around, and also modernizing the system so that it can do those things that PNNL has been studying and executing on. And as we look at that high temperature rate, we're like, oh, we got to hurry. We got to hurry.
Yeah.
We got to move faster on this. So I think the infrastructure package will include some of those items that somebody might be, well, that's not really a road or a bridge, but it is. It is a bridge to the 21st century and to the economy. And so definitely it's an infrastructure investment.
Definitely. And I know you now are the chair of the Commerce Committee, and I think here in my notes I've got a first that this is, it's been a while since there's been a senator from Washington that's chaired the Commerce Committee. But can you talk about some of the work that you guys are doing there? And you talked about the bill that came out of your committee that we talked about at PNNL last week. Can you give us some details on that, and then other work that you're doing in the Commerce Committee?
Well, thank you. Yes, one of the big things is Commerce has oversight on a lot of the research and development infrastructure in the National Science Foundation, and they make they're a big part of what we would call just our research strategy for the future. But the legislation also included investments in the Office of Energy and Science at DOE. So we And it also included an investment in the Defense Advanced Research Program Agency, DARPA. So the bill included, in the end, research investments in all these areas. So the research of today are the jobs of tomorrow. And the thing that's a little different for us is that the amount of competition around the world is accelerating. They too, because of the internet and an information age, can share and make improvements in a faster fashion. And some would say because of, their ways of doing things might even be able to be a little more collaborative or move faster than we can. Now, I believe we can move pretty fast, and I put our ingenuity second to none. I think this is what the United States does really well. We invent, and we love the entrepreneurial spirit of making the next discovery and getting it implemented. And so I think for us, we had to think through, well, what is it about our system right now that we need to change? We want to put more resources here because, again, these resources are the next demonstration of solutions to big problems that the world has, really, not just the United States, that the world has. And so we basically did put more money towards STEM education. We did put more money towards DOE research, hoping that DOE was going to focus on the energy transformation and making it work, that they were going to, decarbonize and keep moving us off of carbon, and that, we were going to get to those next generation energy sources. So that's a big aspect of the bill, is just making those investments. So it's pretty exciting. And then coming to the lab the other day, just listening to some of the ideas that people had about how to use that legislation to create in the Tri-Cities is a tech hub, but the Tri-Cities could be a tech hub on hydrogen, on smart grid, on batteries, on jet fuel. Like, there's so many things that the Tri-Cities is already a technology leader on. But I know everybody, and you and specifically at TRIDEC, spend a lot of time thinking about, well, what is that next thing that we really want to make the right investments in and collaborate so that we're building a more private sector job opportunity growth. And I feel you guys are doing great work. I can just say that this whole focus on solar and the park in the area and the work collaboratively between the public and private sector and these ideas on hydrogen, people, even the investments that I think there's two big investments in nuclear, next generation nuclear power that are coming into the Tri-Cities. So a lot of great things happening, in the Tri-Cities in relationship to the next generation research and development.
Well, thank you for that. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the support that TRIDEC and our community gets from you and your team in so many of our different efforts. And of course, that's a history of TRIDEC, going back to the beginnings as the Tri-Cities Nuclear Industrial Council in 1963 and Sam Volpentest and other community leaders that have always had a amazing relationship with our entire congressional delegation that you and your team have really taken it to the next level. And it's great to work on these projects together. I think from our perspective, as you talk about, and the discussion that we had last week, to your point, how do we transform into that commercialization, that, taking the technology, scaling it up, going past the prototype phase, getting into production, because we feel that we also have those opportunities, based on our manufacturing base, that we could really go vertical, and build out that whole industry as it develops, because obviously our shipping points that you've already made are really attractive, both for export and, getting on both Class 1 railroads, the highway network, of course, and then the river system as well, being able to connect with the ports through waterways. So we're obviously, that's our job. That's what we do in economic development. It's just great to have your partnership to help us sell the Tri-Cities, and you spend as much time as you can here learning about what we're doing and working on those projects together, for sure. I want to talk a little bit more about just go into some detail on what you just talked about, because we really feel that to a certain extent we are the starting of a clean energy hub for the Northwest. I don't think there's anywhere else, locally, at least in the Northwest, where within a half-hour drive you can go and touch all of the carbon-free electrical generators between nuclear, hydro, wind, and solar, and being able to build on that base and do more is kind of our next area. Is there anything that you see, and maybe Senator, as you travel around and through your work with like the Energy Committee, the Commerce Committee, of course, that we can learn from other parts of the country that are really integrating, like say the research, maybe research universities that we have the connection here with our WSU Tri-Cities campus, and then going back to both our state schools as far as research. Any ideas about how we can help build that ecosystem and kind of build out more of that network based on models that work in other parts of the country that you've seen in your travels?
Well, I always worry about access to capital for the business startups. That I always want to see that infrastructure exist where people are looking out for the next generation innovation and putting capital behind it. And this is a very tough problem, very tough problem. And, I always advocate for the Tri-Cities on this side of the mountains, and telling people are always talking about how much research dollars the University of Washington gets, for federal research, and the Tri-Cities gets 3 times that amount, but nobody seems to understand that. And I keep hoping that, we're gonna, make more of a nexus here. Maybe we should be using the internet in a better way to do that. But I would say even Seattle had a venture capital access to capital problem until just, in the last decade, 15 years maybe. They really didn't have the same kind of funding either. So what does it take to create that? Because we see once, there's just so much innovation in the Tri-Cities. There's just so much. And so how do you take all that innovation and turn it into the next phase of innovation, either a test bed or into actual deployment, and then job growth? Again, that America Competes Act that we were doing, which is now called the United States Innovation and Competition Act, is really trying to say, how do we do that faster in the United States so that we continue to lead on these technologies? So I think I don't know. I feel like we almost should, when people want access to capital from the VC world, they go with a pitch, right? They go with a pitch. They come in and they're like, here's our pitch.
Yeah.
I almost feel like we should take the Tri-Cities on a pitch tour of all the venture capitalists and just say to them, this is what we got here. So you tell us what it is that we need to do, to get more of your investments. So we had the Commerce Secretary here yesterday in Seattle, and we had a meeting with some of these people, because part of the legislation is about how do you get the next tier of technology hubs by these investments. And then the venture capital community that was there, they were like, we want to follow the federal investment. We want to follow the federal investment and make investments. And the reason is they get how expensive it is to do business in Seattle now. They know, like, they can't necessarily keep going here. They can't find as many of the, even though we have a robust workforce, it's like expensive. So they're looking for the next place. And so I think for us who care about that next phase of Tri-Cities economic development, I think we need to go on the road almost and start talking about all the R&D investment and innovation, and then see what they say to us, and then basically see what they say back to us. Like, here's what we need, or here's what, we're able to do. And so I think that would be I think they'd be like, well, wait, we only take pitches on products that are already done.
Right.
But you know what? These people they love to know what's happening and what's going to happen next. And then they're great about marrying up, people and ideas. And so my sense is they would want to hear. Definitely the people in Seattle would want to hear. My guess is the people in Silicon Valley would want to hear. And I think we just need to start promoting, just like you said, the Tri-Cities is an expert now on practically every aspect of the next phase of energy innovation. It's almost like you're a test bed for all the transformation that's happening. Yeah. You are, I don't know what you think about wind, per se.
Sure.
I don't know what TRIDEC thinks about that. And the solar farm is going to be great. Obviously, hydrogen, battery, and intermittent power, and smart grid technology, next generation nuclear, hydrogen. We talked about those biofuels. There's a lot there. I'm not on wind. A lot going on in the region in wind. I don't know how much everybody's focused on that in the region, but anyway, it's just a ton of expertise, and maybe that's something to think about, how you're like the one place you can go in the United States of America that can tell you the next generation on every sector of energy. That would be an interesting thing to think.
That's a great idea. We should follow up on that. Maybe, you could help us with some introductions. As you said, I think we've got a great story to tell, and that's a great idea. We actually just met at the Port of Benton this week with a company from the Bay Area that's a pharmaceutical company, had some roots in Tri-City, so had an interest in expanding, maybe an R&D facility. And one of their big asks was, how can you help us with non-traditional financing? We're looking for a private investment to expand our company, and kind of, our cash flow isn't such that we can make this move without an additional investment. What do you have up there? And we were looking at some resources that we have and trying to make connections, but any more resources that we could bring to bear on, this process, how do we accelerate the process, to your point, would be great. So I think that's a great idea. Like, give them the Tri-Cities pitch, not our product pitch, but we'll give them the community, the RD, and the ecosystem pitch. Yeah.
Well, why not? There's a perfect example. You have somebody who wants to make the move, but they also want to know. So you're basically going to go to some people and say, we're the next phase. We're the next phase, but we need partners. Yeah. And if you're not even physically there, being close to there or having already connections, will be helpful. And those people will listen, that venture capital will jump on that opportunity because they know it is the next phase and they want to be parts of that. That's what they like. They like being, seeing the early stage development of technology. They're not that model. They don't try to win their investments aren't based on everything winning that they invest in. Their model is based on 1 in 13 or some number like that hitting and being a big success. And so it's they spread it out pretty broadly.
Well, and I think even coming from a community aspect, that's one thing that we can do, and TRIDEC and our other community partners have a long history of doing it. But if we could almost pitch with companies that we've worked with, and we can show the community support for this company, maybe that helps them in their pitch to the VC or the private equity or however, the non-traditional financing investors, and maybe that broadens kind of the scope of this company's pitch because the community's behind it, and that's definitely something that we could do. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I really like it. Let's talk a little bit about Hanford, because obviously with the Tri-Cities, Hanford, both is our legacy, and I think really some of our opportunities with new nuclear come out of the expertise and the talent and the workforce that we have that has related to both the production phase and then the cleanup phase at Hanford. But you've obviously helped us every year. TRIDEC goes around to our partners and comes up with some specific requests that you've championed for us and go through the appropriations process. But as we all work on Hanford together, is there anything that sticks up in your mind that we need to focus on or think about? Obviously from the community perspective, we're all in this together. We want to make sure that it's safe both for the workforce and for our community. But really clean it up and finish it off as quickly as possible so that we can move ahead, and then even have the potential for further opportunities with some of that property that's out there that we've worked together on land transfers in the past and come up with some good uses for it. The solar farm that you talked about that's in development now, has been a part of one of those processes. But in your mind, Senator, anything that sticks out or things that we need to focus on or next step for the Hanford cleanup mission?
Well, we always have to pay attention to that budget and make sure that no one comes in and tries to do it on the cheap. The problem is always, it's such a big number in the federal budget. People look at it and say, oh my gosh, there's got to be a way that we can do that faster, quicker, sooner, with less money, some idea. So as agencies change hands, you always have to be on top of that and make sure that somebody doesn't come up with, bad ideas. Because usually, again, somebody's just, when you look at the federal budget, there's not a lot of ways to get hundreds of millions of dollars, but you start looking at billions of dollars that stick out in the budget, and then you think, oh, hey, if I could just do this better, faster, I could shave off hundreds of millions and stick them over here. But time and time again has showed that that's not been a good strategy. And in the end, we, end up either just delaying or short circuiting, or basically people abandon those ideas because they're not good ideas. So look, the vitrification plant made a huge milestone in its completion. Now getting it operational is the next thing, and keeping our focus and keeping our heads down and making that a reality will be a tremendous day when that happens. Yeah. But you're right, along the way, we have to really be diligent about the safety of our workforce and the talent and skilling. Hammer is a great facility. We always want support for Hammer, but we also need to continue to make sure that the workforce needs, as we clean up, are thought through and are protected. And sometimes because the operation now changes to this or a different part, we have to rethink some of those pieces. So I would just always encourage us to put, safety at the top, of our ladder here. But I think for where we are, our last energy secretary did a good job of focusing on getting us to this, plant completion milestone, which again, just can't even underestimate how important that is. And it's a very challenging time for all of us as it relates to these budgets, because 10, 15 years ago, Senator Murray and I had a coalition of states that also needed cleanup dollars. But as those sites have been cleaned up, there's no coalition anymore. It's a little more us carrying the weight, right, as opposed to Tennessee and South Carolina and Colorado and Idaho and Washington joining together and saying, this is what the cleanup energy DOE budget needs to look like. Now it's a little more us carrying that weight. And so we just have to continue to be very diligent about making sure that those investments are made. And then we look to the community. You had regional forums before on what you wanted to do with the land. I thought that was very helpful to have those. Those were televised. People were part of the discussion. I thought it helps people buy in to what's next. And yes, I think that, a continued discussion of the future of the site with that kind of open format would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think, me being new in my role and new to the Tri-Cities, it's just really interesting for me to learn about the history, and then, what have we done in the past collectively that's worked out really well and done that, to your point about the regional forums. But I think that's part of telling the Hanford story, going all the way back to the Manhattan Project. And then I think that we have to work together to talk about what's the potential transformation, for this land. How can we use it to build back the concept of the clean energy hub for the Northwest? There's something that we get really excited about that came out of Idaho National Lab, and it's this integrated, energy concept where with some of the new nuclear technologies that we have, we not only generate electricity, but then we also have storage capabilities for some of the models like the TerraPower model. We also have the opportunity for cogeneration, because once the steam makes the electricity, you can also potentially use it as a heat source for industrial uses. So clustering industrial development that someday in the future, industrial manufacturing companies can go away from maybe fossil fueled boilers into, using that residual heat and steam from some of these other processes. So, that land might have some great uses. And again, I think the thing just want to share with you that's really great about the Tri-Cities is that we've been able to build on that workforce and that talent as it relates to nuclear, both on cleanup and then also into the energy production areas. So as the ARDP projects come out, X Energy and TerraPower, NuScale, these companies either have presences in the Tri-Cities. They definitely know where we're at because so many of their team has come through in different jobs that they've worked. And so, I think it's a great story where we talk about, the use of the electron, right? Originally for national defense, transitioning into clean energy, and then this next energy future. And to your point, and it's so great, we're playing off each other about building the Tri-Cities up, but there's so many things that we have to offer companies in all those clean energy sectors.
Yeah, capacity building, you have it. And I was thinking while you were speaking, maybe you should invite some of these people to be your next guest. Maybe someone from Excel or TerraPower or, other sectors might also just help illuminate how much is really going on in the Tri-Cities. And it would be interesting to get their take on why they made the investments there. What made them make those decisions, and what do they see? And what do they see for the future in their individual sectors?
That's a great point. And I'll just share that, as we've had those conversations, like Clay Sell, the CEO of X Energy, I know he's given testimony before the energy committee that you've been on. You've talked to him. He came out to sign the tri-party agreement, which was between Grant PUD, Energy Northwest, and X Energy on the development and the off-taking of the power from this first SMR. And we actually had all three of them on Coffee with Karl, and it was a really great discussion. And they, some of the things I'm sharing with you are some of the things that I learned from those guys about what's going on, with Tri-Cities. The other opportunity there is the build out of the supply chain, and I think that's the opportunity with the smaller modular reactors is instead of scratch building them on site, a lot of the components can be built in the factory and have a lot more make the same part a lot of times and then ship it out to international locations. And you talked about competitiveness. I think that's a really interesting point that I learned about in one of your committee hearings about our role even in clean energy production is some crossover into like a diplomacy role that we can be more competitive, with some of our global countries that we're competing against, and opportunities for throughout the US, but especially Washington State and here in the Tri-Cities too.
Well, let's face it. We're experts on cheap electric generation, and we're also, as you pointed out, this variety of sources for decarbonization. So that kind of data and information is valuable to other parts of the world. And the more you grow the expertise, the more you're in the driver's seat for the export and sales of that kind of technology. And that's, anything that makes something more efficient is going to be of high value. And developing countries want smarter energy production, electricity plans. They just, that it's good for us to have a more stabilized world with people with that, having that kind of generation leading to other opportunities. And we had this inflection point prior to COVID in 2018. We reached a point where more than half of the world's population was middle class. They had reached that status. So that means we have a lot of people to sell products to. 95% of consumers live outside the United States. And if you think about that developing world, and you think again about energy and electricity and the expertise that exists in the Northwest, that's a lot. That's a huge market opportunity, huge market opportunity.
That's a really great point. I kind of shifted gears on you, but I did want to ask a question about PILT funding. I know that you and your team are working on it. Can you talk about PILT funding? Obviously, it goes to a lot of communities throughout Washington State, from Department of Agriculture through Forest Service or potentially BLM, here through Department of Energy. But can you talk just a little bit about the PILT and the PILT budget, the work that you guys are doing on restoring some of that funding that came out of the original budget?
Yes, payment in lieu of taxes.
There you go.
Payment in lieu of taxes is a program at the federal level that helps states who have basically land mass that is taken up for other government responsibilities and thereby doesn't have the tax base to help support things like schools and hospitals and that you would normally have. So the federal government helps to stabilize that. There are counties throughout our state, again, large forest based counties like Skamania County. We have places like Kitsap that has aspects of, three if you count Keyport, naval stations, Bangor, Keyport, and Puget Sound Shipyard. So you help support them with education funding, either through this or the SRS program. And so energy, in this case, is taking up a big land swath in the Tri-Cities. So we want to make sure that there is PILT funding to help support the Tri-Cities and the education system and our colleagues. Again, this is one of these things where if you're from Connecticut, you might not get it. Okay, but if you're from any kind of Western state, you definitely understand that hopefully you understand that this is a big thing. I've seen a few Westerners kind of not get it and not really get it, but you're not going to stay around a long time if you don't get this point, because this is about some of the smallest counties in our state, in like Ponderay, as I said, or Skamania. They need these resources. And the big federal footprint, whether it is the Forest Service or a federal agency, our military, up in Oak Harbor, same thing. They need support for these education systems, and they need the revenue to do it. So anyway, we're definitely going to make sure that the DOE has that we have money here and that we support the PILT program. Our colleague, Senator Wyden from Oregon, and we work very hard on this issue together, and so does Senator Murray.
Oh, that's great. We appreciate that support. And to your point, it is such a critical factor. And as you described your role in Congress, if you're from those eastern states, they'd understand the role of federal land ownership in states like Washington. And I know I lived in Illinois and worked for Caterpillar a long time ago for about 3 years. And I remember, moving there and thinking about what am I going to do on the weekend? Am I going to go camping or something? And then I was like, where can you go camping? Like there's no, growing up in the West, you just think like, oh, I'll just, go up on this public land that we have easy access to. And that isn't the case when you get into the Midwest and the East Coast. So people, when you're from the West, you forget about that. But that interrelationship of the federal government and land ownership is something we kind of take for granted, especially the public access part. Yeah. So that's a great point. Well, we got about 9 minutes left, and I've just been kind of wanting to get back to Gonzaga basketball, but but before we do, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share with the Senator, or any thoughts or ideas, or any things that we could help you, partner with the great work that you and your team do back in DC representing us?
Well, we always care about the development, the Reactor Museum and how that's going to continue to unfold and have access in the history and the story there. When we were debating the the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, there were some of our colleagues who were complaining. They were like, well, this is a lot of change to research and development, and we don't have time to, this is a lot to go through. And I finally just stood up. I was so irritated. I said, really, do you think that was Leslie Grove's attitude? I'm pretty sure like somebody gave him a mission and he had to go and basically build a whole town out of nothing and create and not only do it in secret and pull off a scientific accomplishment. I said, and all we're asking is you read a few hundred pages of changes to research files. I'm pretty sure you should do this because it's not really asking a lot of you. And so I always want to preserve the story. I think the Tri-Cities is on the way to pulling off the second big thing in, scientific challenge, helping us make this transition to future energy sources. It's hard for places to pull off, these things once, let alone twice. But I do think, making sure that people can visit, and obviously we tell the story the right way and continue to give people access is something that, I don't think we've finished all of that yet, is what I was going to say. I don't think we've finished all of the things that need to happen to, the transitioning of the Hanford site and the Reactor Museum.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. That's, we talked about X-Energy when they were here, even with COVID, we were able to get a real brief tour with correct COVID protocols in place of Reactor. And I was able to sit in the chair that Oppenheimer sat in, when he first started the Reactor. And when they came back and they did the tri-party agreement, they used the podium that was built for President Kennedy when he was here in the Tri-Cities in 1963 to launch the N reactor electrical generating station. And so I'm really touched by that. I love history. And so that's a great thing for me and for all of us in our community is the history that we've got in this really science innovation, great example of overcoming challenges and working together to do great things. It's part of our heritage here in the Tri-Cities, and always appreciate all your help on the work with the Reactor Museum and really preserving that and telling the story, because to your point, I think it helps all of us see what the future could be and maybe put things into a little bit more context and say like, hey, this isn't that bad. We can work together and figure this out and come up with some good solutions on how to move forward. So I appreciate your example. That's really great.
Yeah.
What do we got? About 4 minutes. Let's go back to Gonzaga basketball. Why not?
I have a feeling you and I could go pretty long on basketball. I'm just amazed at this new recruit. I guess he scored big in some playoff for USA. Chet Holmgren. Yeah. The 7-footer or whatever he is, and so he's playing in some playoff for USA, Team USA, and just doing really well. So between him and your nephew and a few of those other people, it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to come back to many games, or I mean, that's cool that you were at the Maui Classic. I love your description of it. That must have been like just an incredible event.
Well, one thing that people don't know, first of all, so Coach Few came and testified before our committee on this national, rights for students to use their name, image, and likeness. And he supports that, and we're trying to work something out federally. But what people really don't realize is that the players, the families, everybody went through the COVID process and really had to go to extraordinary efforts just to make that all work, that they had to, I mean, literally the parents didn't even get to go to any the games, I think, until the very end. They didn't even get to see couldn't even go see their kids play, and the kids just showed up and got all their tests, and sometimes they didn't get to play because somebody did. So they, went through a process. So it'll be next year's season will be a lot more fun and enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I watched a lot of the games, on an app, whatever gym they were at, just went online and tried to find it. The East Coast isn't so kind when you're on the East Coast, not so kind to Gonzaga basketball. They weren't showing a lot of the games, so you had to find this website that would broadcast and help you track them down for the week. So
totally. It was cool towards the end of the season, regular season game. I can't remember if it's St. John's. My mom, Ben's grandma, actually got to go and see him play, and that was an amazing moment for her, even under COVID protocols. Like, they were so excited to be in the kennel and watch the game. And didn't I read that in your time in the private sector that you worked on one of the first live streaming athletic events? Isn't that right? Am I getting the right fact there?
You've done your homework. When I worked for Real Networks, and it was prior to that technology, if you wanted to listen to audio or video, you had to download a file onto your computer and then play it back. So that took forever. So no one was doing that. I mean, you're not going to wait 5 minutes to download a 1 minute of content. So they had a streaming technology that allowed you to start playing the content. So before, the bits would be starting.
Oh, right. In process. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the word streaming comes from.
Yeah.
And real or real time content. So anyway, when we were promoting the first use of that technology, we were able to broadcast the first baseball game live on the internet. And we felt like it was a pretty historic moment. We loved it.
Yeah.
We, had audio from the first radio game, and we knew what the first TV, in both of those instances, people were like, oh, this is going to kill baseball. No one will ever go to a game again in person. And you realize that it took a long time, for the business models to catch up with the technology. That's the one thing I really learned in business, is that you can have technology. You can have technology right now, but the business model could take decades to develop and mature. And that's kind of where we are on some aspects, even on the energy front, so to do that. Right. But I'll never forget, because Rick Riz and Dave Niehaus, who were great Mariner voices, started naming all the countries that were listening to that game. They were like, we have people from England, and we have people from South America, and we have people from, so they were naming all of the countries that had tuned into that first baseball game. And people were sending emails saying, oh my gosh, and it was the New York Yankees. So a little more fame than the Seattle Mariners at that time. So people were writing in about, oh my gosh, I never thought I lived in the UK. I never thought I'd hear another baseball game. And obviously it was nostalgic, like radio in general, which is a great way to listen to sports content. So they really loved it. But anyway, Dave Niehaus says, well, we're going to get so many letters about this. This is just going to be great. And Rick Riz says to Dave Niehaus, Dave, they don't send mail, they send email. And it was just this great transition moment of, a guy who was really my most favorite voice ever for sports broadcasting, Dave Niehaus. He was just so talented and so amazing to listen to. But it was like this aha moment of this transformation happening. And now we know, obviously, we not only get to listen to basketball and baseball and everything via the internet, we get these updates, replays, vignettes, and it's really allowed us to share much more of the content. So it's really been but anyway, we thought it was historic. I don't know that anybody else remembers it, but we fondly do. And just the excitement of being part of a breakthrough technology that changed things. And so that was the fun of it.
I think that was historic. I mean, today, like you say, we have so much access to so much information, especially sports related, but really that was the first moment that you could worldwide, tune in and watch a game that wasn't on TV and stuff. That was a historic moment. And look at, like to your point, everything that's come since then. I think that's really awesome. Senator, thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any closing remarks for us? I appreciate you just having this, nice casual conversation, and like I said, all the from TRIDEC and the community perspective, we really appreciate your leadership of you and your team and the relationship that we have and the projects that we just talked about that we can work on together. But you have a couple closing remarks for us.
Yeah, well, great coffee chat, and so now we know this connection. I would just say, we have part of my team listening in too, that, if anybody's interested in any of these issues, we work really hard on energy policy. And Amit Ranan, who's from our office, is listening in too. And so if people want to follow up on some of these things, want to know what's happening, or they want to tell us things, please just contact me or meet at our office, and we'll continue to make connections. And I hope you'll invite me again. And really enjoyed it. So thank you, Karl.
No, thank you. I'm sure that we'll see each other soon, and if not, maybe a Gonzaga basketball game in the future.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well, thanks again. Yeah, thanks, Senator. And I just wanted to let our audience know, next week we'll have the team on from Bechtel that's actually completing these milestones that you talked about at the vitrification plant. So we'll have Valerie McCain and Tom Fletcher from Bechtel, and we'll have a great conversation about these next Hanford cleanup stages. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you again, Senator, and everybody have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.